Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the court, Duran Rudy Macklin.
I still think about it. When my number was being retired, I was thinking about it at that moment.
Get him out! He was wounded. My God.
This one journalist asked me, did the shooting of the president affect your game?
This is not only about points, rebounds, and wins.
I said, look, man, he's not kin to me, okay?
But it's about character, integrity, and class.
It was headlines that Rudy Macklin said that he didn't care about the president being shot because he's no kin to mine. That's when the nightmare began.
LSU, 31 victories this year for Dale Brown. They'll play Indiana in one match. It'll be Virginia and North Carolina in the other. His team was led by Rudy Macklin with 21.
Rudy Macklin is the first legitimate high school All-American we recruited. That 4 years, Rudy was here with the most wins in the history of the school, the most success. He was paramount to turning our program around.
The LSU Tigers steamrolled to Philadelphia as the powerhouse team amongst the Final Four.
We were so confident, I can remember telling some of my friends and family members, oh yeah, we coming back with the national championship. None of those other three teams can beat us.
The fifth finger on Rudy Macklin's right hand, the most discussed finger in the United States leading up to the Final Four, and I guess most basketball fans want to know, Rudy, is how do you think it'll affect your play against Indiana in the semifinals?
It was against Wichita State in New Orleans. I reached out to catch the ball, and when I caught the ball, it popped my finger open. It was a concern of mine going in.
You'll play with just tape on it?
Yeah, just tape, and I just gut up the pain and leave the stitches in there.
If I can get a rhythm, I kept telling myself, I can get going. If I could just hit my patented turnaround jump shot one time, I could get going.
Boy, he's really grimacing in pain with that finger.
I can stand losing when I'm at my best, but I wasn't at my very best that day.
It's a long afternoon on that LSU bench. LSU has had a miserable second half and will taste defeat to this Indiana team.
In 1981, this was before the NCAA brackets were considered like the nuclear launch codes. There was the third place game. It was the cold cuts, leftovers, cold pizza of the day.
The consolation game. Too often overlooked. Battle for third place, they call it.
And Dick, you know what's tough about that? When we have four teams as great as the four coming in here, that there has to be a consolation game.
Why would I want to play a consolation game or a loser's bracket, so to speak? That seemed like something that was unnecessary to me.
We were televising it. It was nice to have the third place game. It was still a third place game.
Monday night's game of the Spectrum may eventually be nothing more than a small footnote in the long history of the city. But Philadelphia is the site, Indiana, North Carolina, the matchup for the National Collegiate Basketball Championship. And of course, we've got the third place game coming up tomorrow on ESPN, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific time, LSU and Virginia.
Well, we have to talk about LSU and Virginia because that's the game ESPN is covering.
You know, it's that Peggy Lee moment. Is that all there is? Third place game? And that was pervasive.
They would rather be on a plane on Sunday, believe me. I hope that doesn't hurt your audience.
No, honesty never hurts.
So here we are in Philly, and we walk in to the press gate. And as we walk in, guard is sitting there, and he's got a little black and white television sitting on his desk. Looking over at it, it's a special report.
It was about 2:30 when the president was coming out of the Washington Hilton, where he'd been speaking to the AFL-CIO, when all of a sudden these shots were fired.
Get him out!
We walked through, out onto the floor, and I will never forget the look on Dick Enbert's face. He'd taken his monitor on the desk and put the rabbit ears up and turned it into a television set, and they were watching the coverage of the reports of the president's health. He looked stricken.
About 5 minutes after 4, the President of the United States on his way to surgery for removal of a bullet that struck him at 2:30. 3 other persons were hurt.
Third place game is looming. They're going to open the gate soon. There is obviously the question, are they going to play this game? There's the question of what's going on in this arena. Are people aware?
You're going through the stands, you're finding a lot of people to whom you're hawking sodas aren't aware of what's happening?
Nah, nobody's mentioned it at all.
There were a lot of people walking into that arena who had no idea that President Reagan had been shot, and certainly had no idea that the event they had a ticket for was quite likely not going to be played that night.
We knew that the Academy Awards had already been canceled, and the big question was, should the NCAA do the same thing?
There was conversation about what impact might this have on the national championship game. Wayne Duke, at that point in time, was chairman of the NCAA basketball committee.
I happened to be commissioner of the Big 8 Conference in 1963 in the John Kennedy matter, and went through a very difficult period in ascertaining whether to continue with competition in the collegiate football games. This is a little bit different situation.
We needed a lot of information before we made a decision with regard to the championship game, and it was too late to try and even have a conversation about not playing the third place game at that point.
As it became apparent that Mr. Reagan's wound was not fatal, the tournament committee reached some tentative decisions shortly before the third place game.
I don't recall that there was any sense that the critical decision of the night, if there was one to be made, involved that game. That game was going to happen.
Well, at this point, I would believe we would proceed in reverence to the President to have a moment of silent prayer and wishes for a speedy recovery.
I can see why, particularly if he survives this, that they would like to go ahead and play the championship game, but why would you play the consolation game under these circumstances?
ESPN presents the National Collegiate Basketball Championship. It's the Tigers of Louisiana State University and the Cavaliers of the University of Virginia.
I don't try to manufacture something. I didn't we got to do this for the president. I just was rather mundane, low-key. I remember the stands, there was nobody in it, and I thought, I wish we weren't here.
In view of the developments in Washington earlier today, we ask that each of us join in a moment of silence, and each person in his own way ask for the recovery of the President and the other wounded men.
I knew coming off the bench when they announced head forward from Louisville, Kentucky, Duran, Rudy Macklin, I said, when I get out that bench, I'm fouling out the game. That was just my mindset.
No good, tip up, no good, rebound. KWKH, it's 4:27, and Alan Pomeroy has more news now from Washington.
In the back of my mind, I couldn't help but wonder what was happening, how the president was doing, and I heard the reports that were given when we would throw to break.
And the president is still in good, stable condition.
Still in surgery and still listed in stable condition.
And now back to LSU basketball. Takes Virginia by a pair with 14 minutes left to play in a slow-moving first half of play here in the Spectrum.
So I kind of knew what was going on, but then I had to quickly shift from that to who's at the free throw line, or Rudy just fouled out the game.
Foul is called on Macklin. And he's fouled out of this tournament. He has scored no points in the ball game.
When I fouled out, I went back to this vegetative state, Still can't get over what happened that Saturday night. Couldn't get over it.
What a disappointment for this great young man from Louisville, Kentucky.
As much as I love the game, that game just didn't seem necessary.
That's the end of the ball game with the final score, Virginia 78, LSU 74. So the Tigers will finish fourth in this Final Four tournament.
Went to the locker room. This one journalist asked me, did the shooting of the president affect your game? That's when I kind of caught my attention. I'm like, why would he ask me a question like that? And I said, if the president was kin to me, it might have had some effect. He said, what do you mean? That's the president. That's your president of the United States. I said, look, come on now. I had a game to play. If he was kin to me, I could understand, like I said, but I had a game. He said, I'm not believing. This is the president of the United States. I said, look, man, he's not kin to me, okay? Next thing you know, it was headlines that Rudy Macklin said the He didn't care about the president being shot because he's no kin of mine. When I got back to Baton Rouge, being gone that long, your mail has a tendency to pile up. When I opened that first letter, dear nigger, and it got to running off how I was an embarrassment to the university and niggas shouldn't be playing basketball and your nigger ass, disrespected the president. And all the letters in there were like that. Every last one of them. Then I started getting these hate calls, and they were talking just as bad as they were in the letters. Went home for spring break. And when I got home, my dad said, son, this box, all these letters came for you. They was just as bad as the ones I had in Baton Rouge. At the advice of a friend said maybe your local paper could write a retraction. That's when I contacted Billy Reed and said, man, I'm in a pickle.
Rudy called me and he was pretty upset. He felt like he had really been unfairly treated, that his comments had been misinterpreted, and I think he kind of wanted to set the record straight.
Billy wrote the retraction, and it caught the AP and UPI wire, and it kind of settled down after that.
How many times have we seen it where you catch somebody at the wrong time and they'll say something that they later regret? I'm confident that's what happened with Rudy.
When you inundated with school, practice, and a demanding girlfriend on top of that, who has time to be political? I liked him as an actor, I can tell you that.
He was a two-time All-American and led LSU to the Final Four. He's the leading rebounder in school history and the second leading scorer behind Pete Maravich.
My father was a man who worked very hard, and he bequeathed us something that was more precious than gold and something was more valuable than monumental brass. He gave us a spotless name.
Your newest LSU retired jersey belongs to Durand Rudy Macklin.
Retiring my jersey, it gave me back my spotless name. And that's all I wanted. That's my son. Was to keep and hand down to my son what my father gave me, a spotless name. That's all I ever wanted.